Welcome, everybody. Today we have Brennan Latimer. He has sold thousands of property across Australia. The man knows every single suburb, state, and territory and has worked with many of the leading property developers. Over the course of his great career, he has amassed a small fortune in real estate and is a man that I very much respect and have spent more than a decade working with. He is now the director and licensee of Richardson and Wrench Plus. Brennan, thank you for joining the show today.
Dom, thank you so much for having me. What an intro. I
Mate, you
better
deserve
get
it. You deserve that kind of an intro. We've known each other for ages. You've been working in real estate, and I've learned lots from you over the years. You know, it's funny because you and I have spent time on buses together. We've presented in front of
yes.
hundreds of clients. We've toured Australia, and you're one of those people that is very well respected in the industry, and the people that are in the know you,
Yeah.
which is great. And I wanted to bring you into the forefront because one, you're incredibly good looking, but two, it's because you've got a lot to say and a lot to teach people about real estate, but also developing a career. So I know that you're a busy man. So again, thank you very much for joining the show today. How you been?
No, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and vice versa to you, mate. It's been great to know you. Like, I think it is about 10 years now when you were doing sales and marketing stuff for a developer, and I was working doing the sales there, and we would host bus tours. So I think we've done a lot of different things together. But congrats on where Wealthy is now. I think you guys have got a great brand. I love what you're doing, and I love the message that you guys are giving out at the market. And congrats on the book. But look, lovely to be here and chat with you and have just an insightful conversation about my time in the market, what I'm seeing today. And I think it's such a funny time in the market today. It's a real estate is all about a game of conversations, right? And taking in so many different perspectives. And I think it's such a funny time at the moment. It's leading to a lot of great conversation, how I feel more than ever, about the future of real estate as well, given what's happening at the moment with demand and supply fundamentals, movement of people, and all kinds of pressures that no one saw coming. So it's definitely a good time to have a chat like this, basically, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there asking so many questions as to whether it's career orientated or so many investors that I know you guys are helping get into the marketplace, basically. Yeah, so good to chat.
You've touched on a bunch of really important topics. Obviously, we've just had a rate rise, which surprised a lot of people, but some others saw it coming just because it's still quite a hot market. We've had 2 consecutive months of the Australian market basically coming off zero. We're about 1% above bottom. And it's no surprise, I guess, in some ways that they did raise interest rates. Now, depending on who you talk to and what chat rooms and what YouTube channel you watch, some people are going to say, well, if they continue doing this, the market has still, the worst is yet to come, and we're going to tank. And then there's another school of thought that says interest rates isn't everything, and the property market is going to continue growing. How are you seeing things?
Yeah, and you do get so many, like, look, I at the moment with my business, I work across two fantastic size groups, Positive Real Estate and our business, R&W Plus. I work in doing direct sales myself, and I also work in doing listings, which has seen me do like thousands of property deals over the course of my like 13-odd year career now. But those opinions are really important because working East Coast to West Coast and everywhere in between, it's different. And actually, you've got vendors thinking different things, which are swaying into their mindset of pricing and strategy and around releasing how many lots and stuff like that, which is all influencing the market. But look, I think you're right. I think for the most part, there's a bit of fear mongering still lingering around, recession looming off the premise of these rates really, slowing things down too hard, too fast. Then there's the other school of thought around the fact that, and you raise a very good point. Interest rates just isn't enough. Maybe that is the case. If you think of, there might be a dozen reasons why a market influences to a market to see it rise and or fall. Interest rates, job climate, elements of supply and demand, population movements, all that sort of stuff. If you think about the market right now, and this is what I always am trying to explain to buyers, because what we do is all long term. I'm not here to talk to people about real estate for a year and see it, sell it, and see what happens. I know you're the same. acquire great properties, great locations, long-term hold, support yourself financially to live the life you want later on. That's the blueprint. Now, the market at the moment, if you think about it, unemployment still the lowest ever. Rumors of it going up a little bit maybe in the near future. Doesn't matter. It's still really, really low, all-time low. We've got population numbers absolutely off the head. Not only are we catching up after the plummet that we had from COVID of lack of migration and people exiting, we're going beyond that now as well. So the forecasts now are absolutely staggering for how many people are coming into this country. Demand, we've got that obviously with the population. The supply has fallen off a cliff. You'll know it. I know it. You know, real estate listings for us to go and get that are any good anyway are so few and far between. We know that just in the normal secondhand residential market, listing numbers are way down as well on historical, like 5-year averages and compared to this time last year. So there's no supply coming to the marketplace. Obviously, lending is still quite good, not what it once was, you know, circa 10 years ago in terms of how much serviceability people could get thrown at them, but it's still good as well. So like if there's all those myriad of things, like we've got good. The only thing that's really hampering actually more growth happening right now is the sentiment in the market off the back of interest rates. So actually, when you think about what the future holds, once those interest rates really hit that ceiling, which is a lot of people saying now at 3.85, maybe we get to 4.1, but it peels back quite hard and quite fast the same way it has gone up. I think once we get to that point, everything else I just rattled off, which is which has got green light, mate, we're going to see more growth. And that's why CBA has come out now saying for the combined capital cities, they're expecting 3% this year, 5% next year. Some markets better than others, but you know, there's no reason to see why. We don't have the supply and we've got the demand, which kind of out trumps a lot of other factors that have an influence in the market right now. So that's why I'm just quite bullish on real estate, you know, myself personally and working with the clients we do. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you said so many things there, and there's two that I want to highlight. I've been talking about them a lot recently all over social media, and that is supply and demand. Demand is triggered by a number of different things. One is the access to capital, which is interest rates, but demand is also influenced by investments in infrastructure, so what's happening within a specific market. And then it's also influenced by population growth. So population growth is, you know, your natural birth and death rate inside of a country, but then it's also migration. And they're saying there's going to be 700,000 migrants coming into the country over the next 2 financial years, which is a staggering number of which you've said. We haven't seen these kind of numbers. 700,000 people is a lot, to say the least. Yeah. And the two big winners of migration is Sydney and Melbourne. Then after that, you kind of got the interstate migration where, you know, everyone comes into Sydney, Melbourne, and then after that, they're like, it's too fucking expensive. Let's go to Brisbane. Let's go to Adelaide. Let's go to, you know, the rest of Australia. Brisbane's typically the big winner because of the climate. If you were going to make a prediction, just a hard and fast prediction, where do you see the market in the next 12 to 24 months? I know it doesn't matter, but there's so many people love that crystal ball prediction.
In terms of which market location?
Let's just talk.
Just how the market.
Let's talk broadly and but what is your top performing state or city in Australia over the next 24 months?
Great question. There's two for me that show fantastic signs, but for two different varying, I guess, levels of interest, two different buyers. So Melbourne, I can't argue with the really, really basic, without getting too complicated into a myriad of like growth fundamentals, right? Let's take a look at Melbourne. You can go to any half decent suburb in Melbourne. Now I'm based in Sydney, okay? Now I can take any sort of decent suburb in Melbourne that I like because of demand and supply, location, infrastructure, existing or forthcoming, okay? Now the real estate, new designer real estate being like a townhouse or a unit block will be anywhere from a third to a half of what an equivalent kind of suburb would be in Sydney, okay? Now, couple that with the fact that it's now actually our largest capital, and we know the numbers of interstate and international migration that traditionally hit Melbourne, there's no other argument other than just what I said in terms of the sheer value orientation that that market holds with what's coming there. You cannot go wrong for a 2, 5, 10, 15-year hold of some good quality real estate. That being said, there's a lot of bad real estate out there. You got to separate a bit of fact from fiction into this market versus that market, this property type versus that one. You know, people can get it wrong. And I've had some real estate in the same street. I've done deals which have made a couple of $100,000 over a few years, and the same street, on paper, the same sort of property is going backwards. So it's really important to actually get the property right. But in a general sense, that market for me is really undeniable. I just think that the real estate there is so affordable compared to even what Sydney is. Now, Sydney is Sydney, but even if Melbourne closes half of that gap, even half of that gap, if it closes it, people are sitting really well holding a good quality asset in the Melbourne marketplace. The second answer to that question, I'm a big believer of the Brisbane, the Southeast Queensland market, namely the Brisbane market. I'm big in sticking to the capitals for the most part, or large centres. For me, the Brisbane sort of house pricing to me is offering huge opportunity for investors at the marketplace. Anywhere from like 750 up to like 1.2 million. Like I'm doing deals now 9 kilometres from our third largest, vastly growing capital CBD, Brisbane. You do a beautiful 400 square metre block of land and a build, you're talking about $1.2 million. So again, I don't think you can even repeat that 70 Ks out from Sydney CBD, and we're talking about a growing marketplace, and we're talking 9 Ks out from that third largest capital city. Plus, it comes with like over a 4% return. So those two strategies for me are something that I know that we focus a lot on, and we're just very careful with where and what we pick. But I think that those sorts of things, as far as someone, I know what we're preaching here about getting good quality assets for long term. I just couldn't see anyone going wrong in those kinds of marketplaces right now.
That's really good feedback. I completely agree with you. There are some landmines that you can tread on in both of those markets. So buyer beware. It's not just a factor of just throwing a dart and you're going to be fine. I mean, largely you will if you hold it long enough, but yeah, as Brennan just said, there are markets within Melbourne, markets within Brisbane, and types of real estate that will perform better than others.
100%.
With that in mind, what is the one thing you consider when assessing the type of real estate you're going to buy in a market? Like, what's your hot tip when picking a piece of real estate for a given market, suburb, or location?
Yeah, good point. I guess we like to be able to put up a range of different types in each market. So we'll be working on real estate in any market we like, which is 400,000 to 1.5 million, to match a wide variety of buyer profile. And that's units, townhouses, and some custom houses as well. But then within those markets, you kind of want to be doing it right. Like typically, a lot of people will make some mistakes of going to what's, realistically a housing orientated market and looking at some small townhouse or unit orientated product. So you're already off the mark with meeting the right demographic kind of demand that's going to be on that asset into the future when you do want to sell. So it's really about understanding the demographics of that location and picking the right real estate. A challenge in the marketplace at the moment, which you'll know about, is because of the increased construction costs that we're seeing around the country. Some of the strongest so far have really been in the Southeast Queensland market. There is a really more increasing gap between that old versus new that we're seeing. And you go to some marketplaces and a new 3-bedroom townhouse will be the same as a 3-year-old 4-bedroom home on 350 or 450 square meters. And you're kind of off kilter with that market. So that's what you've really got to look at to make sure that the prices are actually matching, and getting the right kind of benchmarking in that marketplace as well. So, are you doing a new home package in a market where you're $500,000 away from the median household price?
Yeah.
Red light. Are you $20,000, $50,000 away from the median house price in that suburb? Green light. We're in the right money for what people are spending in that marketplace today, because I'm not interested in setting benchmarks and records and being the first cab off the rank at $1 million when everything else is 600. So it's really sort of, I guess, analyzing prices, seeing where you sit, and making sure that old versus new is in the right sort of realm to make the investment stack. Yeah.
That's really good advice. You're talking about the buyer profile or the demographic profile is so important. There's many people out there will look at investments and just look at it purely based on the numbers and what it means today. But I'm a big believer in looking at real estate and having the exit in mind, even if you're not going to sell it. Knowing who is going to rent it, knowing who is going to buy it will set you up for success for getting a tenant that's going to pay a premium, but then getting a valuation or potentially selling it and buying your dream home, or divesting part of your portfolio, taking cash and then redeploying it in more sophisticated assets, or just clearing debt. So having that exit strategy in mind. And just to have a specific example, you know, in the market that I'm living in, there are a lot of downsizers that are living here or moving here. They want single story, flat block. They want open living. They don't want too much grass. They want easy maintenance. So if you go and build a tri-story home, you're fucked.
You're missing the mark, 100%.
Yeah, you're missing the mark. So if you hit the mark, then the premium you'll get on the back end is far superior than building something that is just an investor product or something that you personally like. So you need to be able to feel or understand the investment, but don't go too far the other way. Yeah,
exactly right. And taking downsizes into consideration is such an important thing to do these days, across varying markets, of course. But we're facing one of the biggest retirement phases this country has ever seen over the next decade or so. So the downsizer push that's going to be coming into our marketplace, it's already begun, but it's going to be so much stronger. So you'll start seeing more larger 3-bedroom units pop up in complexes, even some 4-bedroom units pop up in complexes now, as that sort of shift is really starting to take place. And of course, Australia, you know, we look at our most mature market like Sydney. Other markets are catching up in terms of the maturity and the demographic shift and the property types and household styles and changes. But we're still so immature compared to other capital cities around the world, you know, in terms of like the density of households, people living in flats or the terrace-styled homes and things like that. So there's a lot more of that wave of kind of real estate to come through to our country, because there's so many people moving here. We're going to have to make the supply more dense, whether we like it or not, basically.
I want to touch on that point because that's one thing that I learned. I've lived in London, I lived in New York, and I'm very lucky to have spent a lot of time working with people over there. And the thing that I learned coming out of those major cities was we are very small and a market that is in its infancy. Our population is small relative to these major global cities.
It's still so young.
Still so young. And you know, when you go to New York or, you know, San Francisco, if you go to London, there is a really mature apartment or flat market. Proximity to, you know, to the right places is so important. And, you know, there's no right sense of entitlement in those cities. Here we talk about affordability crisis. New York, people in New York don't whinge that they can't buy premium suburbs within New York City or Manhattan. They just move out. You know, they go to Brooklyn, they go further. Brooklyn's too expensive now. Same thing in London. They go to zone 2, 3, or 4. You know, there's no hung up. So getting a prime piece of real estate in a major metro market is an excellent way to sort of future-proof your portfolio, as you're talking about. You know, Melbourne within 10, 15, 20 kilometers. You know, Brisbane within 9 kilometers, spending, you know, about $1 million or something, $1 million and some change.
Yeah, go to that middle ring or, you know, 25K radius, and you're doing 700s for housing and stuff like that as well. Really impressive value.
Brennan, I want to talk to you about your career a little bit. So just a slight pivot away from real estate. Now, you've been building this career. You've really hit your stride over the past, you know, I couldn't even say, because you've been so consistent and just really hitting massive milestones. But I want to ask you about, when was it for you when building your career that you really did catch a stride? What was it that happened to you or changed that made you say, this is how I'm going to be going forward? Or what pattern did you set up to create that lasting success?
Yeah, sure. I guess there's been a succession of steps to get to the kind of thing that I'm doing today, which is I do have quite a diverse kind of role, which I'll touch on now. But look, my background, I was studying a bachelor at UTS here in Sydney, a bachelor of property economics. It's quite a unique degree. I don't know if it's necessarily offered too many other places, but it's essentially an economics style degree, majoring in property. So I always had a passion for real estate. I'm pretty linear thinking, facts, black and white. I'm that kind of person. Real estate to me is tangible. My parents laugh at me. My dad was an executive director and things like that at a telco, and my sister's off in that kind of realm as well. So they think I'm crazy buying investment real estate. They've only ever owned their homes, but tangible. I like it. It's not rocket science, real estate. It's literally the most tried and tested, consistent vehicle of wealth creation, realistically, not just here in Australia, but really around the world. So it's something that I knew that it was there forever, and something to kind of base your career on. So look, before the end of university, finishing, I actually, gentleman Sam Saggers is head of positive real estate, fantastic mind in the real estate industry. I got on board with him and actually started doing like really small one-off buyers agency style deals. Like I was going to areas you'd never even heard of or thought of, and doing things that were producing like a 10 to 20% cash flow and all sorts of really funny stuff like that. So I started out doing those really sort of boutique things, and it grew into the business evolving. And then I became sort of the lead acquisitions agent. So I was scouring the country, networking with some of the biggest and best developers, listing these amazing projects. And then our volume of transactions started to pick up. And then it's just spun to the R&W plus thing. So it was an ability for us to have essentially a two-prong effect working on our projects, where I've got a public brand and then there's a very private off-market wealth creation group brand. So we're able to do quite good numbers of transactions in the real estate that we work on. And it allows us to get some really good kind of bulk negotiation techniques as well with developers. So we can squeeze lower discounts, we can squeeze rebates. We're going to come in and deliver a good amount of sales. So for me, it's kind of been a bit of an evolution, but real estate was always something for me. And I kind of hit my strides those first few years of figuring out what the hell property is about, how it even works, a contract process, how many people are involved. You'll know, like actually when you stop and take a think about property, there are so many people involved: a buyer, a seller, an agent, two solicitors, a broker, a couple more people in between, and a lot can go wrong. So it's a pretty frustrating. I used to always joke internally that I miss working at a bottle shop where someone will come in, take the 6-pack of beer and go away and you'd never see him again. And property is literally the direct opposite to that. But once you get past that learning phase and you got into really like, all right, property, I get it now. Like then you pick up that bulk method, and then it really started to turn into your own interests and getting into my first personal investment deal as well, which is where you really start to devote yourself to property. From that point on, from that point on, I'm practicing what I'm preaching. My money is going into real estate. So I've got the same wins and the same losses that my clients do. That's the real turning point for me. And I think you'll know when you did your first deal, it was like that element of a bit of addictive kind of, I want to do my next one again. How can I do my next deal? And then that's when it just started to snowball and get more serious, and our volume picked up and the business got a bit more sophisticated. So now where we actually do some of our own boutique developments as well, and actually raise some capital out in the marketplace through a licensed funder and do some fantastic things in the market. So we're able to help investors not just buy retail, but invest in some unlisted, boutique REITs essentially as well. So yeah, it's been quite an evolution to kind of doing what I'm doing now. I've had some wins, I've had some losses. I've worked across good markets and terrible markets. I've had sales years where we've lost money, sales years where we've made money, and everything in between. But definitely hitting your strides, I'd say, as a property person, it's crazy to see how many people don't own real estate and work in real estate. So getting that first deal, I think, is when you start to really pick up your socks and develop that passion for it properly, basically. Yeah.
So it sounds like to me, you did say it's a linear thing, but it sounds like to me it was about a function of following your passion, starting small, and then building upon layer on layer and incrementally forging this career, and then using the successes of your past to sort of push you forward to then just keep on adding on. I really like that because it follows the same methodology of investing in real estate. You buy something small that you can afford, hold on to it, service it. After a decade of doing something consistently, that's when you really start to see the fruits of your labor. And now you're 13
Yeah.
years on, selling 500 plus properties a year, built a portfolio, and you've got an understanding of basically the whole of Australia and understand at least the macro levels, and in certain markets, the details and the minutiae. So there's a lot to
Yeah.
learn from that. Now, obviously we can sit here and talk about all of our wins, but I'm interested to
Yeah.
learn about one of your LFYPs. What's your lesson for young
Yeah.
players? Tell me about a story or a time in your life where you fucked up and that changed the way that you did business going forward, or
Yeah.
the way that you made decisions going forward.
I guess I've got two. I've got two. So when I was a bit younger in my early 20s, I had some success in the share market, which gave me a return enough to actually have a deposit amount to actually go and purchase something in Sydney. So we're talking, I'm 35 now, so call it 12 years ago. Obviously, the prices in Sydney 12 years ago, it was a lot more entry level for a lot more people, right?
Yeah.
So at the time, I was able to go and buy anywhere from like a $700,000 to $900,000 property. And I remember looking, I was poking around the Lower North Shore in Sydney and Camaray, and I was looking at 3-bedroom units and townhouses. And I was ready to go. I had the ability to do it. And I remember my old man, who was quite conservative, he actually got in my ear and was like, listen, that's a lot of debt for a young man. I don't think you should do this. And obviously, I'm now in property. I'm studying property. I'm working in property. I'm bullish on property as an asset class. So, but sadly, you know, you listen to your old man, right? So I did listen to him. I sat out, and then I consecutively became that person that every single year watched the real estate market in Sydney go up and up and up and up, saying to myself, like everyone did, oh, it can't go any higher. It can't go any higher. It's got to come back. It can't go any higher. And lost out on easily $1 million to $1.5 million of what could have been in opportunity cost essentially in that market. So I guess the lesson for me there was you kind of got to follow your gut a little bit. Like if you're passionate about something, don't listen to people, you know, that necessarily aren't focused on that in the same. Like if I had that advice to not buy that property in that area from a property person, fair enough. But it was the whole anti-sell of that strategy, so to speak. So it's really about, I guess, kind of this making sure you listen to the right people. And I do it all the time. I do a lot of travel for work. So will you. And it's you get in, the cab driver will tell me a story about how there's a recession coming and like, don't do this, blah, don't do that. And what are you talking about? So you just got to be really careful who you listen to. So that's an annoying one. I still hit up my dad about that. Make sure he's got some kind of inheritance to pay me back on.
Before you move to the next, I want to touch on that point. So there's a really important lesson in there. I really like that point because there's a lot of people that will get in your ear and they mean well. Yeah. They don't want you to lose, and they're always going to say don't do something because they're trying to protect you.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
If that doesn't pay off, then they're not going to pay you for the win, right? Now there's a $1 million gap between where you were and where you are today. And it's funny because I remember having a coffee with you in North Sydney and you telling me about wanting to buy something in Camaray on that Lower North Shore.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, fuck, that's a great idea. You should do that.
We could talk all day about the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I know it's a disaster, but yeah, good point. It's always a really, really valid point for anyone and everyone. The second one for me is my first property deal. I went really, really, really regional, and something I don't necessarily do today. I did my first deal actually in Gunnedah, which is regional New South Wales kind of area around Tamworth. Really speculative, all that jazz. You know, this was I would have been in my early 20s again. So this was like a mining orientated related play. So a bit more of a speculative kind of play. I bought a block of land, split it into two, built 2 strata titled freestanding homes. Now, I was so in love with this deal for some reason. I don't know why. Like the cash flow was okay. There were growth. There was equity at completion kind of numbers clouding my thought as well. But I did that deal on black soil. You know what I'm talking about? So around the Gunnedah area, some of the most richest, best soil there is, great farming land. I did on black soil. Now, black soil is like the most volatile soil there is. And I heeded warnings from the builder, and I thought, well, what, it's just soil. I don't, whatever, build around it. They did some necessary peering and stuff like that till they hit clay or rock or whatever they could below the soil. But mate, the nightmare that I had with those properties, the shifting, the cracking, the plumbing stuffing up, that much movement going on underneath there, that those houses at time when I did want to sell them 6-7 years later, I could nearly not sell those properties because the street literally had a bad name about being on volatile soil. So really, really silly move. 2 reasons. The cash flow on that, I did make a tiny bit of capital growth after 7 years, but a waste of time, waste of opportunity cost. The cash flow was good. I did dump a lot of money into an offset account, so it was paying me a secondary income. That was probably the only positive to take away from it. And I was making some okay money, so the depreciation from those 2 properties was kind of $25,000 in year 1 or more that I'm able to depreciate. So there are a couple of wins there, but conversely, if I'd gone and bought a house 10Ks from Brisbane for 750 at that same time, easily 1 to 1.5, so sort of double growth, if not more, in that same sort of time frame. So the opportunity cost was just massive for going to that small speculative market, which was based off the premise of like the Shenhua mine, Chinese orientated mine, finding some really rich coal deposits out the Gunnedah Basin there. They got a green light, then they got a red light, then they got a green light, then they got a red light to go, and it ended up basically not happening. And they're essentially buying the land back, from what I understand now. So it never took off. And so two things. That was a big mistake for me. Not listening to people who were like, mate, stick to capitals, and then not listening to people going, this is very volatile soil, and understanding more about what that really meant as well. So cost me time, cost me money, cost me a few of my hairs, which are falling out now, as you can see as well. So yeah, it was a really good lesson to learn. Really good lesson to learn.
That is a really good lesson to learn. And sometimes going for the simpler thing is the better strategy. I feel like people always look to overcomplicate property. My book, You Won't Fuck It Up, shameless plug. I do talk about that. You Won't Fuck It Up is about not overcomplicating the simple things in real estate. Buy the simple stuff and allow it to do the heavy lifting for you. And I do like developers. I do like developing. I believe in building houses, all that kind of stuff. But oftentimes you can find the path of least resistance in real estate, and you will still do very, very well relative to others that are doing crazy areas, trying to do really complicated deals. And I feel like unless you're going to make that your profession, then probably steer clear away from it. Unless you're going to be a developer, then don't develop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, correct. You're not going to get the result.
Yeah,
exactly. Some of the most successful people I know from property are the people who literally, the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. That's literally how you would describe everything that they did. Like people who didn't even really love or know about property, but they just knew that, Australians love real estate. It's inherent in our blood, right? They just bought real estate when they could. Didn't do analysis paralysis. They bought real estate when they could 10 years ago. Didn't even really harp on about it. Killed it. Have gone and bought another one. Just went, maybe diversified into a different market, bought another one. And just really simple stuff like bought a house, bought a townhouse, didn't go into too much analysis or in-depth yip-yar about anything or try and do anything, crazy structures and teaming up with people and subdivisions or anything like that. And they've absolutely crushed it. So yeah, keeping it quite simple is, and that, look, the mantra for me is about, look, if someone can buy $2 million worth of real estate, hey, let's look at 2 or 3 properties. Let's diversify. Let's get singular properties. Let's get a unit house or a townhouse. These 3 markets, they should balance each other out. You hold those properties for 20 years. You'll sell 1 or 2 to pay off one completely. At the end of that, have a passive income to support yourself in retirement. There's the $10,000 model. That's the blueprint. It's not much to it, and it's pretty simple. And a lot of not so intelligent people have been making a lot of money out of real estate for a long time as well, following basically that principle.
You've basically answered the next question, which was for new homeowners and investors, what's the one thing they can do to not fuck it up? Yeah. And it sounds like you answered it. It's
just that as well. But look, I think now it's a tough one. Like, you got a lot of people complaining about not being able to get into the market now, and realistically, it's just not true. There's a really funny thing on Instagram I've seen at the moment about these two tradies talking to each other, and it's about how they're whinging about not being able to buy a house. And then the one tradie's going to the other one, hey, what's your sport bet account look like? He's like, oh, it's not good. How many bags did you buy on the weekend doing some drugs? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. How much money did you spend at the pub on the weekend? Oh, yeah. How much is your new Ford Ranger? Oh, yeah. How many trips to Bali did you do this year? Oh, yeah. So it's a lot of that going on. So there's a lot of how to fuck it up is to just, you've got to just be pretty hardcore on yourself, saving some money and get into a property when you can get into a property. Like, there's deals in Canberra where you can secure a piece of real estate now with $23,000 and have a beautiful designer one-bedroom unit in a really good growth market to hang on to for 10 years, which, while you're saving up to buy maybe your forever home, that's only going to support you from depreciation, giving you a little bit of passive income, and then obviously giving you a bit of capital growth at the end of that period to help yourself in some way. So no excuses, get into real estate when you can is definitely the best advice for anyone out there. You can't buy the $3 million Sydney home. Don't give up and then just piss it up the wall. Like, go look at what else you can actually do, which is going to better you. That's the best advice I can give people.
When you're talking to me about that, it felt like going around the Monopoly board and buying property when you can. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I like the Canberra analogy because a lot of people are going to shit can buying a one-bedroom apartment and say it's not going to do anything. I've had clients that came in, bought a simple one-bedroom apartment in Canberra, spent 20 grand buying a 400K, one bed, one bath, one car. Yeah. By the time it completed, it valued in at 520 odd thousand. That's 120K above the original purchase price for putting an original deposit of $20,000. And you're not going to save that amount over an 18 or 24-month period. That's not going to happen for everybody all the time, but the lesson remains that buy what you can when you can, because you won't outsave the growth of the property that you buy.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably the biggest thing for me. And look, I've still got mates who do so well in their respective positions at work and industries. And a lot of them still don't own any real estate. And they always say to me, I don't know if you get the same from your friend network, oh, the spruiker, like, whatever, mate, go get your signboard ready for the weekend, even though I don't do normal residential real estate. That's where their brain goes. And I'm like, sometimes I catch them out all the time still saying stuff. And I'm like, listen, mate, at the end of the day, if you bought a deal with me 5 years ago and shut up, you'd probably be $500,000 richer. So we can bully it all we want. Just got to get into the market. You just have to. It's only going to get harder. That's the bottom line.
I put out a post just the other day, and it was about property never feels cheap. You and I feel that because we have to constantly reframe what a good deal means. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we have to keep on shifting with the time, where people not in the industry, it's shocking. Every time they look, it's 2 or 3 years, they're looking like, holy shit, what happened to property prices? But you and I, we're doing it every single day, and we never think, like, that's cheap.
I still fall into that trap. Every single project I list, I'm doing my due diligence, I'm working away at it, and I stop and think and go, geez, this is expensive, because I'm stuck on maybe the last one I listed 2 years ago and some other pricing. But I can tell you that every single time, look, some deals win, some deals might make nothing. Very rarely we've had pretty good success with no deals kind of going backwards or anything like that. But every single time we have a deal finish up and we go and check it out and walk through it, we go, geez, this feels cheap now. How cheap was this? Every single time. But yeah, at the start of that process, we were like, oof, 2 betters a what now here? Then at the end, very, very different story. And I don't know why that's not going to keep happening. Obviously some areas are going to hit their ceiling, but then we just need to go to that next market mover where the pressure's heading, and that affordability push is going on, basically. Yeah.
Mate, I feel like you and I could talk about real estate for the next couple of
hours.
I know. This isn't the Joe Rogan podcast. We keep it short and sweet. Brennan, thank you very much for jumping on the show today. You're an absolute weapon. I've learned lots from you just today. I hope everybody follows you on all your tags and handles. I'll put it in the podcast notes later. And
check it out. I try and put some really good informative stuff on LinkedIn almost daily. So it's good stuff for people to check out, see what's happening in the market. But Thank you so much for having me come along, Dom. Been great.
Thanks, mate. Happy investing, everybody. Happy house hunting, and I'll catch you all later.
Bye for now.